Okay, so welcome everybody to the McEwan Hall at the University of Edinburgh. My name is Jane Norman, I'm Vice Principal at the University of Edinburgh. We're here today to celebrate International Women's Day. As you will know, this is a global day celebrating the economic, political and social achievements of women past, present and future, many of whom we can see on these slides here today. So our lecture here today is part of a global series of events connecting women from around the world. And these events range from political rallies, business conferences, government activities and networking events, through to local women's craft markets, theatrical performances, fashion parades and much more. In the UK, there are over 400 events happening, and throughout the world there are thousands happening to celebrate this particular day. So in parallel with the lecture here today, we've also got 2 photography exhibitions in the university, both on the theme Inspiring Women, Inspiring Change. These exhibitions are portraits of inspiring women at Edinburgh University. One of them is in the old college quad, and the other is in the University Visitor Centre across from the McEwan Hall. And I'd encourage you all to go and have a look at these wonderful exhibitions. This is our 5th annual lecture, and previous speakers include Irene Khan, who's former Secretary General of Amnesty International, and the author Philippa Gregory. The title of this year's lecture is Women in Sport, Going for Gold, and I'm really thrilled to have 2 Edinburgh alumni, Katherine Grainger and Louise Martin, to come and talk to us today. And I'm also particularly delighted that Shona Robison has very kindly come to introduce the lecture. Again, Shona will need no introduction from me, but she's been an MSP since 1999 and is now MSP for Dundee East. She's Minister for Commonwealth Games and Sport, and she's obviously extremely busy given the arrival of the Commonwealth Games in July. So we're particularly delighted that she's been able to come today. So Shona's going to come and introduce Katherine. Thank you, Shona.
Well, thanks very much for that kind introduction, and happy International Women's Day, everybody, including the men that are here as well. It's a great day to celebrate the way we've come and the journey that we've come towards equality for women, but also I think to reflect on where else we need to go and what more needs to be done to get true equality. But it's a great day to come together. I'm sure we're going to hear some really fantastic speeches and perhaps some lively debate as well. I think I'm really heartened to see that this lecture attracts fantastic speakers who are absolutely a source of inspiration in their everyday lives and great role models to women around the world. Believe it or not, there's only 137 days to go until the start of the Glasgow Commonwealth Games. That's quite scary, actually, but good as well. That's an event that's going to demonstrate what the spirit of sport is really about. People across Scotland and indeed the world are planning their journey to witness one of the biggest international sporting events that our country has ever hosted. I hope to see some of you there. But for me, and perhaps on a more personal note, events such as the Commonwealth Games also offer a truly inspirational narrative for the people of Scotland too. Last year I took on the responsibility for equality as part of my ministerial portfolio. Equality is part of the aspiration and ambition that we have for Scotland. We want a society that is fair and just, in which we can all participate, flourish and benefit, where we respect and value diversity, and where we work together to build a buoyant and successful country. And as part of this commitment, I've been working to continue to raise the profile of women in sport. The Scottish Government, in partnership with Sport Scotland and NHS Scotland, have identified women and girls as a group that are underrepresented in sport. Therefore, there's a need for targeted work so that we can redress the imbalance in their levels of fitness and general health. Getting young girls active and have them to continue to be active into adulthood is absolutely crucial. I firmly believe that girls and young women can be inspired and motivated by successful female athletes. We recently watched Eve Muirhead leading the women's curling team to bronze success in Sochi, and of course here today we have Katherine Granger, gold medalist in the Olympics in 2012, and who I know tells such a compelling tale of her own personal journey to success, and we'll hear more from Katherine later on. But it's also important to have committed and influential women across sport governing bodies, broadcasting, business and the media, of course, to help us promote and motivate women in sport. We recently established a short-term working group for women in sport, whose remit is to examine a number of areas, which includes raising the profile of women's coaching in Scotland, harnessing the power of social media to promote women involved in sport, and achieve a better representation of women's sport through the general media. Although the group is in its infancy, I'm very encouraged by their commitment and ideas and look forward to working with them to achieve our shared ambitions of getting more women involved in the world of sport, whatever their role may be. And I also look forward to working alongside Scottish Women in Sport, another fantastic group that was launched last year and who share our determination to raise awareness of women's role in sport. However, it's now my great pleasure to introduce Katherine, who is an athlete admired throughout the sporting world for her dedication and work ethic to achieve the highest goal in sport. Coming here today reminded me of that day in 2012 at Eton Dorney, when we all held our breath, willing Katherine to fulfil her dream to become an Olympic champion, an unforgettable day. And there was tears, there was screaming, and that was just Louise Martin. Katherine is now a regular spokeswoman for women in sport, and she's someone who wants to encourage other women, and I think that is fantastic. She wants to give back and encourage women to follow in her footsteps, and I think that is absolutely great. So enough of me now. Do enjoy the rest of the day, and meantime I know that you'll all be looking forward to hearing from Katherine and her extraordinary story. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Katherine Granger, CBE.
Thank you. Officially Dr. Katherine Granger now. I know. Seriously, when you start collecting titles, you just want to keep going. Massive pleasure to be back in Edinburgh. I just love being back. I come back as often as I can, which isn't often enough for me. But it's genuinely lovely to be here. I'm going to talk to you for a bit. It's not a lecture as such. It's basically a chat. I feel it's just us here together. We can share. And I was speaking to my mum before I came here. Obviously, you have to speak to your mum all the time, especially when you don't live at home, and she wonders what you're up to all the time. Never grow out of that. And I was saying I was going to come and speak about International Women's Day. And her first reaction was, do you really think we need it? She was almost disappointed that we actually have to have an International Women's Day. And it did make me think, because there's kind of two trains of thoughts of, should we even have it in the first place? Is it patronising? Is it necessary? Shouldn't every day be Women's Day? Versus, actually, we need a day to stop and acknowledge where we are, acknowledge what's been done, acknowledge what needs to be done in the future. So either way, I said I was coming. So she had to accept my arguments. And I'm incredibly lucky. I've come from a family of very, very strong women. And we talk about role models and we talk about kind of having heroes. And I think one of the best things growing up you can have is having those people who are actually family members. So my gran, when I was growing up, always lived up in the northeast, up in Aberdeen way. The most incredible, inspiring woman that I could imagine for my gran. And she and my granddad were married for about 60 years. And my granddad was in the police. And my gran just did voluntary work most of her life, didn't actually work. And she used to drive my granddad mad, because apparently when my granddad locked up the prisoners in the cells next to the prison house where they lived, my gran, who was a brilliant mix of like really tough woman, but massive soft side, would drive over from mad because she'd make nice home bakes and come and feed it to the prisoners, feed the bars. And she just had this amazing way about her that just, this incredible caring side, but very strong with it. And I think that's one of the best things about women. My aunt, before I grew up, emigrated to the States and had a whole amazing life out there. Was the first person to sort of leave the country in my family. My mum was the first woman in the family to go to university. So I've just had these amazing, inspiring women around me the whole time. And I thought, if the very least we can do on International Women's Day is celebrate, but also motivate, then we're in a pretty good place. I'm mainly talking about sport today because obviously that's my background. And I was lucky enough just to start rowing by accident when I came to Edinburgh University. Didn't mean to do it, didn't mean to go into it. I came to study law, thought I'd have a flourishing legal career that would bring in a lot of money, and instead I became a very poor athlete. My mum and dad still struggle with. But when I first arrived in Edinburgh, they just had the first ever women's captain of the boat club. And there's a girl called Dot Blackie, who was my absolute role model when I started off. I'd never met her, but her picture was on all the walls of the gyms, down at the boathouse, and she was the big inspiration. And she was the first women's captain, and she ruled, apparently, with an iron fist. And just, everyone was always late for training. And it's before the days of mobile phones, and she arranged a pick-up around all the streets to pick people up to take them down to the boathouse. And she decided one day after everyone was late that if they weren't there, then tough. So she drove around all the streets and gathered whoever was there. But she got to the boathouse, then drove through to Glasgow to compete, and there was only about 3 of them. And there was all these people at the end of the street late going, where's the minibus gone? And then after that, no one was ever late again. So I came into this club. I came in from a family where I felt anything was possible as a woman, and I came to a sports club where actually women were in charge. And it was brilliant because it felt normal. It wasn't, we didn't have to campaign, we didn't have to fight for it. We had these incredible opportunities, and it was open to anyone. Didn't matter male or female, gender wasn't an issue when I got into rowing at university level. Then I got into rowing at Olympic level. And I went to my first Olympics in Sydney. And when we went there, at that point, women had never won any Olympic medals in rowing at all of any colour. This wasn't done. There was this guy, Steve, someone, who was going for his 5th gold. And he was a massive role model to us all. And unbelievable work ethic and success rate. But there was no one else on the women's side, no one equivalent on the women's side at all. And the great thing about the Sydney Games in 2000, it was the 100th anniversary of women competing at the Olympic Games. And the final bit, when they light the cauldron, is always a surprise, who's going to light the cauldron. And in Sydney, what they did was, as the torch came into the stadium, they did a relay of previous Olympic champions from Australia, all female. And they came in, and Dawn Fraser was one of them, who's a swimmer for Australia, who'd won 8 Olympic medals and 4 golds. And she was one of the last people to carry it. And she had this incredible rebellious streak when she was competing, and she was actually banned for swimming for 10 years by the Australian Federation because she had once, in the 1964 Olympics, worn the wrong swimming costume to the ceremony and probably didn't go with her shoes or something. And she also allegedly tried to steal a Japanese flag. Allegedly. So a nice bit of rebellious streak, but she got the torch at the end and handed it to Kathy Freeman, who ran up the Olympic steps. And Kathy Freeman was about to make massive history because she'd be the first Aboriginal woman to go for and then win Olympic gold in 2000 in the 400 metres. And Kathy Freeman ran up these incredible steps up to the biggest stadium they've ever built for the Olympics, 115,000-seater, with this crowd just erupting with noise and light. And she had the torch, and she walked across this pool of water they'd put on the stadium and dropped the torch to the end, and the whole thing ignited in flame around her, and then rose up to light the cauldron for the next 2 weeks of the Olympics. And then we were in the stadium 10 days later when she went for her final. And I have never seen any athlete under that amount of pressure ever in that stadium with that number of people watching to see if she could finally deliver the Olympic gold. And when she walked in just to warm up, the whole stadium went quiet and everyone stopped. And even Denise Lewis, our heptathlete at the time, and Jonathan Edwards, triple jumper, they were competing at the same time, and they said their event stopped. And all the referees and umpires stopped to watch Kathy Freeman attempt to win that gold medal. And she went down to starting blocks, and it was just silent. And as the gun went, noise erupted, flashballs erupted, and the whole thing lit up. She came around the back straight, pulled away from everyone, smashed that day, won the gold medal, collapsed in exhaustion, huge celebrations all around. And everyone was utterly ignited by this woman who just made history in front of that number of people and that number. And we get all this time about, oh, well, people don't really like watching women's sport. 115,000 sellout crowd. I don't care what nationality they were, everyone wanted Kathy Freeman to win that day. And it was just a lesson in just that impact that moment can make and that inspiration can make. For us, back on the rowing course, less expectation on us because we were women who rowed and no one knew who we were. And we won the first ever medal when we got our silver medal on that day. And I remember coming to an event afterwards when people said, "Oh, congratulations, girls, it's amazing. We didn't know women could row." I don't know if that was physically or I don't know what they thought. But I was at an event in Edinburgh at the hotel, and I remember I was in there with my Olympic blazer, my first Olympic blazer, and it's got the Olympic crest here, and I was in a lift in the hotel, and I was with a young couple who came in at the same time. I remember we got in the lift, and you know that awkward bit in the lift when everyone just stands there? You pretend to look at the numbers still. And I saw the girl looking at the Olympic logo and staring at it for ages, and then nudging her boyfriend. You know, you do that polite thing, still looking at the numbers, pretending I can't notice this. And then as we got to their floor, they went to go out, and they turned, and at the last minute, the girl turned back and said, "Can I just ask you, were you at the Olympics?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, what did you do?" And I said, "Rowing," thinking she'll go, "Oh, I didn't know women rowed." So I said, "Oh, rowing." And she said, "You were not one of those 4 girls who got the medal, were you?" And I said, "Actually, yes." And she and her boyfriend both went, we stayed up all night to watch that. It was the most incredible moment. And that, again, seeing it for live, seeing Cathy Freeman do it for live in the stadium was one thing. Coming back thousands of miles away from where the event happened, being in a hotel, away from it all, and still meeting people who were inspired by that moment, who'd never watched rowing before in their lives and never thought about that sport in that way, and they were inspired by that moment, showed me the massive power that it has. The amazing thing that happened after Sydney was huge participation numbers changed within the country because women suddenly could row and could be successful. But also within the squad at the very top level, women believed it was possible. People genuinely, when they talk about role models and stuff, there's such truth to it. It really is an amazing effect if you see people doing things and then you believe that's possible. So we first ever medal for women's rowing in 2000. In 2004, just 4 years later, we took a smaller group, we took 8 women to the Olympics for rowing. Everyone had trained for 4 years, believing suddenly in the medals were realistic for British women. And every single woman came back with an Olympic medal in 2004. And 2004, 2008, we won Olympic medals the whole way through. And 2012, as we all know now, was the first time ever that British women won gold medals. It was my first gold medal after 4 attempts. And I just happened to win it the same week that there was 3 women's boats won gold medals. So they made it look easy. And for 4 of the girls, it was their first Olympics. And they won it straight away. So don't speak to them anymore. But it's, in the time I've seen it utterly transform across the board. And there's a lot of stats also show, just in the last sort of 20 years or so, how different it is. In 1992, there were 159 events for men and 86 for women. In 2012, there was 170 for men and 140 for women. So it's not equal yet, but massive, massive improvements. In the British team in 96, 8% of the medals were won by women. In 2012, 42% were won by women. So numbers are changing, stats changing, success is changing. And we're seeing that ripple across the board. And it's an amazing thing, because I think women don't get into sport feeling they can change the world necessarily. They get into sport because they want to prove something to themselves, to their teammates, they want to achieve, they want to succeed. They love what they do, they're passionate about what they do. The amazing spin-off is this incredible, empowering thing we've managed to give back to people. We go to, all the athletes go to schools and clubs and speak to people, and girls all around the country have ambitions like I've never seen it before. People really, really do have incredible ambitions now in what they can achieve, and they think it's possible in more ways than they thought possible before, and it's not unusual now. I think Britain has changed and that we're much more ambitious, but I think women especially, it's quite normal now to be ambitious. It's not the embarrassing thing that you kind of keep to yourself. And that has utterly transformed. And going a little bit off script, because as I said from the beginning, I came here to study law. And I sat in this room doing exams for the 4 years that I was a law student here. And I've gone on to study a master's in and a PhD in medical law and criminal law. And for all the massive improvements we've made in sport, the athletes that I know in sport are not in a bubble of sport the whole time. People are very, very aware of the world we live in, and we travel a lot and we see a lot of the world, and we are so aware of how lucky we are in this country and the opportunities we get, and the funding that we get, the support we get, the help we get. And we compete against countries that have nothing like that. And in 2012, it was the first time ever that every single nation sent a female representative. Because up until then, countries like Saudi Arabia hadn't sent anyone, because women don't have that right to. It was the first time ever in 2012 that every sport had a female equivalent, because women's boxing came in. So you're still aware that in certain parts of the world, there isn't that equality, and that's still something we need to fight for. And I think the great thing in sport is a very safe place to try and change things. It's a very safe environment to fight and to argue and to get numbers changed and to get results changed. What we need to now is see that equated in the real world, so to speak. When you look at the headlines today, and there's been a lot reported because of International Women's Day, if you think that globally 1 in 3 women will be beaten or raped, and if you think in the UK, they've said that 44% of women in the UK will have experienced some type of sexual violence from the age of 15, and 30% of women in Great Britain who are in a relationship will have had some sort of domestic abuse. Those are numbers that are not getting better and are not things we can shy away from. And I think when we talk about female genital mutilation, 130 million people in the world experiencing that, there are so many massive, massive issues for women that we should care about and we should be motivated by. And the fact that women get tortured because they want access to education. You know, I sat in this room, I remember particularly a tax lecture or tax exam, wishing I was anywhere but. I wish I could be anywhere but. And actually what a privilege that was, to sit in this lecture and sit in this room and sit in those exams, when you think women around the world would give their lives for that opportunity. So I think for International Women's Day, for me, let's celebrate. Celebrate all these things, all the things we've done better, all these things we've improved with, all the great places we've got to. But let's also feel motivated, because there's so much yet to do. It's an exciting place, an exciting time. We should be inspired, but we should also care. We should feel motivated to make a change, men and women, on everything. And the best things about sport is it inspires people and it changes people's lives. And if we can capture that and move it into whole other areas of the world, then we've had success right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine, for that wonderful and inspirational talk, and I hope we'll have time for some questions and answers at the end. It's now my great privilege and pleasure to introduce Louise Martin to you. So Louise competed in the 100 metres and 200 metre backstroke finals at the 1962 Commonwealth Games and has remained associated with the event ever since, having been instrumental in creating the Commonwealth Youth Games and also in Glasgow and Scotland's successful bid to hold the 2014 Commonwealth Games, which I know we're all looking forward to. Louise is currently Chair of Sport Scotland, Vice Chair of the 2014 Commonwealth Games Organising Committee and sits on the board of UK Sport. She was awarded a CBE in the New Year's Honours List for services to the Commonwealth Games in 2003. And last but by no means least, she's an Edinburgh alumnus, and Edinburgh University remains incredibly proud of you, Louise. So we're very grateful again to you for coming to speak to us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And how do I follow Katherine? I'm delighted to be here today, and I've been asked to share my story of the journey through sport with you. Sport has always played an important part in my life, and I became involved as a competitive swimmer, and as you heard, I competed in Commonwealth Games in Australia, and that was in '62, but I was one of those young ones, you know, at the age of 10. Now, if you believe that, you'll believe anything. But anyway, it was the first time I was on a plane, and that was some journey for a 15-year-old. I retired at 21 and concentrated on my career as a teacher, a sports nutritionist, and my family. When my daughter Kerry became a gymnast, I was drawn back into sport as a volunteer, firstly as club secretary, then the North District Secretary, progressing to the Honorary Secretary of the Scottish Gymnastics, and then President. During this time, I went to the Commonwealth Games in Victoria, Canada in 1994 as gymnastics team manager, then Kuala Lumpur in 1998 as part of the general team management. By then, I'd become more involved in broader sports administration and sat on the board of Commonwealth Games Council for Scotland from 1986 and was elected chair of the Commonwealth Games Scotland in May 1999. Now, when I started out as an administrator in sport, I faced many challenges along the way, not least balancing the demands of family life with those of a volunteer. But the biggest challenge I faced was being accepted as a woman in what was then and often still is a male-dominated world. In 1999, at the General Assembly in Fiji, I was the first woman to be elected to the board of the Commonwealth Games Federation. And convincing the Federation members that I was up for the job was not easy. Now, I remember very clearly we were asked to talk about ourselves for about 5 minutes. Standing up in front of virtually 98% men and 2% women was not an easy task. So, as I was walking down, the Canadian delegate, female, "Don't talk about women." Okay, what do I do? You know, and that goes on in your mind all the way down the thing. Anyway, as I stood up, the first thing I said, "Please, it's not my fault I'm a woman. That was decided long before I was born. Judge me for what I can do, not for what you see." And thankfully they did, and I've been the Honorary Secretary General ever since. Fiji, 1999, will remain with me forever. I viewed my role within the Commonwealth Games Federation as a fantastic opportunity to influence sports development and to promote sporting ideals. Here in Edinburgh, in 2000, I introduced the Commonwealth Youth Games to the International Sporting Programme to give our young athletes an opportunity to experience a multi-sport games environment, but with competitors of a similar age in their development. We even used the tattoo as our opening ceremony. I saw the event as a stepping stone to senior competition, and it's so satisfying to see the talented young athletes who have gone on to achieve great success at Commonwealth and Olympic Games. The Federation will be hosting the 5th Youth Games in Samoa in 2015. Now, part of the Youth Games as well is learning about the culture of the countries that they go to, so all these 14 to 18-year-olds will certainly experience something fantastic in Samoa. Within the Commonwealth nations, there was no forum to share their experiences of sport development. So we needed to create an opportunity to learn from best practice, to understand the challenges individual nations face, and to inspire us all to keep striving to be more innovative in our thinking. To achieve that aim, we established the Commonwealth Sports Development Conference, hosted in Scotland in 2007, with the 4th being held in Glasgow last year. In addition, I was delighted to be appointed to chair KBOS last year. This international body, as its name suggests, was set up by the Commonwealth Secretariat to further the development of sport at all levels within the Commonwealth. Glasgow is at the heart of a sporting success of which I am immensely proud. Together with a group of like-minded individuals and with the support of Glasgow City Council and the Scottish Government, I led the bid process to bring the Commonwealth Games to Scotland. As a former athlete, I still have the competitive instinct, and when at the Games in Manchester in 2002, along with the then First Minister Jack McConnell, we agreed that Scotland could do this. Thus was born the bid to bring the 2014 Games to Glasgow. Had I known what it entailed, I might have thought twice. 5 long years lobbying Commonwealth nations, the time spent away from my family, and more airplane meals than I care to remember were tough. But what kept us focused was the absolute belief within the team that we could do it. Don't get me wrong, there were times when we didn't agree. We closed the doors and shouted, but we always presented a united front, worked together to achieve our goal, and never lost sight of where we were going and why it's so important. And I may also say it's exactly the same today. Everyone is still behind this, organising the Games and getting there. We don't always agree, but we always come out with a united front. The 9th of November 2007, the day of the announcement, will be forever etched in my memory. Those few seconds leading up to the bid announcement were the longest few moments I have ever experienced. But when, my knees are shaking now thinking about it, but when Mike Fennell uttered the word Glasgow, that was one of the best moments of my life. What made it so special was knowing that the whole of Scotland was celebrating too. The country was united. Sport has the ability to do that. Following the bid, I was honoured to be appointed as Chair of Sport Scotland in May 2008, and in 2012 I was reappointed for a second four-year term. I'm also, as you heard, Vice Chair of the 2014 Organising Committee. As you may have gathered, I am passionate about sport, and I make no apologies for that. Sport has the power to change lives, but we need strong leaders in all their guises to drive that message and to innovate, inspire and deliver. The impact of role models cannot be underestimated. They can inspire a young person to take up a sport, train harder or strive for success. They can also influence people who may not be sporty to use the talents that they do have to deliver for sport as volunteers, administrators and leaders. Despite ill-informed tabloid articles stating to the contrary, I believe that here in Scotland we are very fortunate in having some incredible female role models in sport. Athletes like Katherine, Katrina Matthew, Eve Muirhead, to name but a few, all embody the spirit of sport for me: ambitious, dedicated, determined, and promoting positive images for young people, both here in Scotland and on the global stage. As leaders in sport, we need to demonstrate those same attributes. It's never too young to start. I'm encouraged by the number of young girls who have embraced our leadership projects, including Lead 2014, Young Ambassadors, and the Youth Sports Panel. These are our leaders of the future, and they are already making a huge impact in their clubs, schools and local communities. As those who have gone before them, it is our responsibility to ensure that they are given every opportunity to succeed and have all the tools that they need to shape the development of sport in Scotland. Well, it's fantastic to be here to celebrate International Women's Day. There is still so much to do to ensure that women have every opportunity to take up leadership roles in sport and in society in general. In percentage terms, female leaders in sport are still very much in the minority. Currently, almost 25% of the chairs of Scottish governing bodies of sport are women, and 38 Scottish governing bodies have at least one woman on their boards. However, less than 15% of all the governing bodies, body members, are women. I'd love to see more women on our boards leading our sports, but I won't advocate for positive discrimination or appointing women as a numbers game. We want to be appointed because we are the very best person for the job. Talent, self-belief, passion, knowledge and skills are what is required for a strong board. What women sometimes lack is the self-belief in what they have to offer. They have it, but they're frightened to put it forward. More and more networks are emerging to encourage women to work together to provide support and development opportunities. By sharing experience and influence, we can help other women to develop into leadership roles. Now, that would be a fantastic legacy for this decade of sport. Recently, I've been privileged to have been travelling on the Queen's Baton Relay, visiting nations and territories across the Commonwealth from Asia to South America. It was so inspiring to see how the baton was embraced and celebrated by whole communities on every step of the journey. It really is a sight to behold, and you will be able to witness that in June and July this year. However, I was reminded how women in some of those countries still face enormous challenges just to be allowed to take part in sport, never mind achieving their potential at the highest level, like Katherine here. Access to sport and physical activity is something that we can sometimes take for granted here in Scotland. However, there are still barriers to overcome and encourage women and girls to believe that sport is for everyone. At Sport Scotland, we work with our partners in Youth Scotland, YDANS and the Youth Sport Trust to create more and better opportunities for participation through our Active Girls programme. Central to the success of this initiative is consultation with the girls themselves. We believe the best people to initiate change are often those the hardest to reach. Through real consultation and empowerment, more and more girls are taking part in a huge range of activities, from Bollywood dancing to more traditional team sports. They are now taking on increased leadership roles within their schools and community clubs, and most importantly, they are enjoying the experience. That's a very positive step in the right direction. As you all know, 2014 is a memento year for sport and a huge opportunity to profile women in sport. The Winter Olympics were dominated by the success of the British women on Team GB, creating credible new role models for young girls. Of course, the silver medal won by our men's curling team was quite an achievement too. At the Winter Paralympics, which started today in Sochi, and first British medal was won by a female. But however, watch out for primary teacher Aileen Nielsen in the mixed gender wheelchair curling. When she was selected for Paralympics GB in 2010, Aileen became the first female to skip a curling team in either the Paralympics or the World Championships. Aileen has said that she wants to be a good role model, not just for her own team, but for any curlers watching, to encourage more women to take up the sport. 4 years on from Vancouver, Aileen remains the only female skip at the Paralympics. However, the number of female curlers are on the rise. Also in action this weekend is Ailey Child, captain of the British team at the World Indoor Athletics Championships in Poland. It's fantastic to see a young female heading up the team. What a great message to send to aspiring athletes. Ailey has worked exceptionally hard during her career, both on and off the track, and is thoroughly deserving of this appointment. She's already demonstrated her leadership abilities by captaining the first ever Scottish team to take part in the Glasgow International earlier this year, leading by example and earning the respect of her peers. And of course, the Commonwealth Games here in Scotland is fast approaching. I hope you'll either be there, volunteering, or watching us on television. We will witness 2 weeks of the best that sport has to offer, athletes at the peak of their game making history. For us at Sport Scotland, however, it's about so much more than those 2 weeks, exciting as they will be. We are determined to deliver a lasting sporting legacy, using the Games as a catalyst to deliver real progress towards a world-class sporting system at all levels. What that means for me is providing more opportunities for people across the whole of Scotland to become engaged in sport, whether as athletes, coaches, officials, administrators, or volunteers. I have been very fortunate throughout my career to have been involved in sport in all of those roles and have loved every single minute of it. Sport has the power to change lives. It certainly changed mine. And if my story and my work in sport inspires other women to follow in my footsteps, then that would be a personal legacy to be proud of. And to everyone here, all the women and the men as well, never ever say, if only, or I wish. If you do, you've missed the chance. So all I can say is thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my story with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, again for sharing your very inspirational story. Thank you. I think we've probably got about 10 minutes. I hope we've got our student ambassadors with some roving mics to go around and take any questions from the floor. So if you do have a question, maybe you can put your hand up and the students can come to you. Maybe I'll just start off and ask each of you what piece of advice do you wish you'd had as a young woman but didn't receive? That was cheating.
Thanks, Katherine. What advice do I wish I'd had? I have to say I was very lucky because my mum, who's been a huge inspiration to me, was a woman who gave me a lot of encouragement and advice. I was struck by what Katherine was saying about her family. I was actually the first person in my family to ever get a degree at university. And my mum, from when I was a very early age, made it very clear that the world was my oyster, as she used to say, and I could do anything that I wanted to do and set my mind to. So I can't really think of any better advice than that. And she didn't say, you know, you should do this, you should do that, just that whatever you want to do, you can achieve. And that confidence that Louise was talking about and belief in that is so important. And I have to thank my mum for that. She's such an intelligent lady, but her life circumstances and chances, you know, during the war, for example, she was evacuated and had to leave school at 14, didn't finish her education, and she could have gone on to do anything, and she clearly wanted that for me. So I've got a lot to thank my mum for, and I really can't think of any better advice than she gave me.
Okay, great, thank you. Would you rather answer a different question? Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
That kind of rings true with my experience as well, but I've kind of found that coaching and refereeing and things like that is still very, very male dominated. Is that kind of, I mean, do you think that's important? Do you think that's true? Do you think?
I think it was true, but it's now beginning to change. Just the way that with the male-dominated sports like football, rugby, this sort of thing, that they are now changing. They are looking for women to come into sport and making sure that they do fulfill all the criteria right through all the coaching from UKC 1 right up to the top. And we have a lot of women who prefer to have tried the active part of the sport, but now prefer to be either as the coach or a judge or something like that within that. And we are on the increase in that. And this is, there is a role for everybody in sport, and everybody will find that niche somewhere. You just have to keep trying. So if you're going into refereeing and coaching like that, then good luck.
Yeah, I have to say I'd agree. I think it might be changing. I think it's still massively male-dominated, especially at the very, very top level. I mean, I'm in rowing, and there's very few, certainly in Britain, top female coaches, and even internationally. The ones who do are incredibly successful. There is something incredibly successful at female coaching, and it is a slightly different style, and it's proved to be very, very successful globally. I think the hard thing in a way is that a lot of people get into coaching later in their careers. A lot of them have been athletes first and then go into coaching, and often at that point in their lives, and this isn't just in sport, it happens in all, if women have to choose between a family life or a working life, especially the international coaching side, there's a lot of time away from home, there's a lot of international travel, and it's still, because it's still male dominated, you're very much in the kind of boys' club, and not every woman wants to go into that environment and take on that role. And I think we have to address, there's social issues around it. There really is, that they need to be addressed at the same time. But I think what's been proven is that women are incredibly good at it, and there needs to be more ways to get women involved, whether at a younger age or different encouragement and support around them to do it, because I think we do need female coaches.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we've got some questions down here. Guys? Just round at the front here, guys. Do you want to put your hand up and then? And then another one at the back next, please.
This question is really to all of you, although one of you actually has the power to do something about it, and it's really whether there's enough compulsory sport in school and there's enough facilitation for girls, I guess, in particular, since it's this particular day, but it goes for boys as well. It's great the Commonwealth Games is coming, the Olympics were inspirational, but really if we're going to get the long-term kick from that, it's really going to change society, and this touches on health issues as well as issues of esteem amongst women. We've got surely to enforce more sport going on competitively between schools, because I suspect after the initial kick in the younger years, an awful lot of kids, both boys and girls, just give it up altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very biased on this, because obviously I love sport, and for me, sport is such a no-brainer. There's so many benefits from it, and I've spoken to enough people who haven't had wonderful experiences of sport at school, and it's generally the way it's been taught, or the lack of opportunities to try different things, because everyone finds something they do love eventually, but often it's not at school. Both my parents and my sister are all teachers, so I think initially I really struggled with the fact, of course there should be more sport in school, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. You speak to teachers currently and they just ask, where can you put in the curriculum? They're under such pressure. It's not kind of their fault that there's not more sport in schools. There's no time for anything really. And ideally that needs to come from someone more important outside.
Dr. Granger. I think this is hugely important. When I took over as Minister for Sport, I became obsessed almost with doing one thing in particular, and that was making sure that every school delivered at least 2 hours physical education in primary school, 2 periods in secondary. Not because it's a be-all and end-all and in itself isn't enough, it was just because I was outraged that it hadn't been done as a minimum. So we've been on a journey with that. We've put quite a lot of money into it, and we're now in the 90+% of schools delivering that. We're now focusing very much on the quality of that and making sure it's good quality. But in addition to that, the Active Schools Network, you might be aware of, is a fantastically successful programme which introduces other sports that maybe young people haven't had an opportunity to try before, and that's funded to the tune of, I think it's around about 15–16 million a year. So that's a really big programme, but we're also funding a programme for girls in particular called Active Girls, and we've put resources into that to tackle teenage girls dropping out of sport. So again, we're focusing on that. And lastly, on competitive sport, we, in discussions with Sport Scotland, decided that actually there was an issue about the quality of competitive sport between schools that was, well, I look at my daughter's school and it was maybe not the most professionally organised event when they had their sports day, and there was a lack of inter-school competition. So we're on the case with that. Sport Scotland have been working to set up some areas to see how we can improve it, and then we would roll that out. So we're on a journey, we're not there yet, but you can be assured that all of the issues you raise are very much on my horizon, and hopefully we'll see progress being made over the next few years.
Just continuing on from what Shona said, using the Active Schools as the tool for this, we have an Active Schools coordinator in every single school in Scotland now. Some have more, depending on the size of the local authority, and working with the local authorities to ensure that this happens. It's one of the ways of either taking it from morning before they go into school, and then lunchtime or after school, and you know, when school finishes. It's still, although we've got everybody there, we've still got a long way to go. The one good thing about it is that our numbers of pupils taking part is increasing dramatically, and this is what we want to see, and it's leading on from that will then come back into competitive sport. And just trying to, over this next 2 years, what we're trying to do is make sure that we have school sports competitions within each of the different local authorities and things like that. So as we've all said, it's not the ideal world at the moment, but we're getting back to where we were in the 1980s. So.
Okay, great. I think we had one more question at the back there.
Hello? Right, thank you very much for a very inspiring set of lectures. It's an equality and diversity question, I'm afraid. Heather Abats was on this morning on Radio 4. I think she's the only female on the board of the Football Association. And it was this thing about, you know, she's the only female, there's very little diversity at all. There's been a lot of discussion as well about, you know, whether black football players and so on. So obviously in the Scottish context, I think particularly, probably less so in Edinburgh, but certainly in Glasgow, there's quite a wide, diverse population. I'm not seeing these people at the top in terms of administrative roles and so on. And then there's a direct question to our rower. Congratulations. I fought a battle to get a boat club together in Cambridge, which was successful as well, so you can always do it. But the issue there is, of course, diversity again. To get to row at a young age, if you're not in, I have to say, a posh private school, how easy is it? I know it's been a problem down south in England, but certainly in Scotland, I hope we're sort of bringing up the next rowers, boys and girls. Thank you.
On the issue of diversity, we are working very hard at the moment with the Public Appointments Commissioner and across government to look at our diversity in public life. There's a couple of issues. Really, one is about creating the pool of people, and that goes back to Louise's point about some people rule themselves out because they maybe don't see people like them in public life and leadership roles, so it's a catch-22. So we're working to address that and create a pool of people who represent Scotland more accurately than at the moment. And then we're working with boards to open their doors. I think sometimes there's an element of when people are interviewing, it's maybe subconscious, they tend to appoint people like themselves subconsciously, and we need to change that. So we are on the case, and we want to make those changes in public life. When it comes to the governing bodies of sport, the working group that I referred to earlier on is looking at that as part of their work. Some are better than others. We've just had the first woman appointed to the board of rugby, which is a start, and she's a very powerful woman. So she is on a mission to get more women in there. But we have other governing bodies, which football you mentioned, where there is a challenge, and you know it's about levers and how we encourage them in the best way we can, and we'll be having further discussions about that, but we're absolutely on the case.
Well done for doing the Cambridge Book Club thing. Good job. Off the back of that, one of the biggest publicised sporting events across all sporting events is the Oxford-Cambridge boat race. And even, I've worked with the BBC on it last year, and even they don't understand why it's so massive. It's just globally massive because it's got tradition and history, and it's very easy to understand. 2 boats, one wins, one loses. A lot of people celebrate, a lot of people cry. Grown men crying, it's marvellous. And but because it's so, I mean, we didn't really cover a lot today on the coverage of women's sport, because it is the influence of TV, internet, newspaper, whatever coverage is massive on people's perception of things. So when things like the Oxford-Cambridge boat race is still hugely popular and massively supported, massively watched, which is great from a rowing point of view, people still sort of think that's partly what rowing is. But actually, the reality is totally transformed since that time. The people I row with, especially on the women's side, but on the whole squad now, at the international level, it's a huge mix, really diverse mix of backgrounds and sort of ages and cultures, and you know how they started, when they started. There's loads of different routes into sport. It used to be that only certain schools had those facilities and those access. Now, you know, there's lots of kind of headhunting type programs that you often go to other sports and find athletes that way. I came from a school in Glasgow that didn't do any rowing at all, and I went out once on the Clyde, and the Clyde's full of, you know, really local clubs that are packed every weekend with kids, just, you know, from Glasgow kids, from, you know, not private schools at all. And it's still quite a strong university sport. It's very competitive in the university levels. So often you get, you know, people who are coming through who are educated and go on to do that. But it's certainly not the truth that you have to have gone to certain posh schools to do it anymore. And I think the squad, and everyone will say it, is much better for it. The sort of influence then goes out. You see people, you know, it's the old role model thing is if you know someone from your area that's gone on and be successful, then suddenly you feel it's possible for you to go and do it. And the great thing is we now have a much wider kind of group of people who are interested in it because they've seen people go on and do it, and then that sort of spurns the next generation that will be even more wider reach. So it's just much healthier for every sport to have more influence from all different areas, as it is with boards, as it is with everything.
Okay, great. I'm conscious we could keep talking all afternoon, but I think we may be better stop. So I'd just like to thank our speakers and introduce Lorraine Waterhouse, who's going to give our vote of thanks. Thanks, Lorraine.
Well, 3 things remain for us to do. First, will you join me to thank our 3 inspiring speakers for their collective wit and wisdom about a sort of inside scoop on women in sport, but also about the whole question of the development of girls and women in Scotland. So please join me to thank them. Thank you. I think we would all wish to give Katherine the best of support for the marathon, which I think you're running in London. Yes, we hope that that goes extremely well for you. And the second thing I'd like to do is really to thank you, our audience, for your presence and your participation. I think it's been the very best question and answer series we've ever had at a lecture before. So thank you very kindly for your support. It really is a great privilege to us to have you here today. And the third thing that I would like to do is just to mention the exhibition of photographs of 40 women in the University of Edinburgh, which we have commissioned to coincide with International Women's Day. You will have seen examples of them when you came into the hall, and you can see them in another form, if you like, but more face-to-face, in two places in the university over the duration of March. You'll find them in the old quad in the area that is grassed now, and you will see some stands there in which the all 40 portraits are displayed. Weatherproofed, I must say, so hopefully they're going to look as good at the end of the month as they do today. And the second place that you will find them is very close to hand as well, but in slightly turning to the right as opposed to the left when you leave here, is in the visitor center. And there you will see other examples of the photographs that have been displayed there. So I hope you will have the time and take the opportunity to see our exhibition. We're very pleased with it. We hope that it helps to reimagine our institution that we're very, very committed to. And we hope that you will find it interesting to see the many walks of life represented by women in our university. So thank you very much on all our behalves for coming today and for celebrating International Women's Day with us. Thank you.
This production is brought to you by the University of Edinburgh.